Good afternoon to all of you. My name is Rajkumar. I'm the Vice-Chancellor of OP Jindal Global University. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you to the fifth thematic session of the conference on the theme Media of Law School during and after COVID-19. I have great pleasure in formally welcoming all our distinguished panelists and introducing you to them. We have with us our moderator and my own colleague, Professor Dr. Shilpi Bhattacharya, who's a professor at Jindal Global Law School. We have Professor Amita Dhanda, Professor of Law and Dean Academic at the Nalsar University of Law, Hyderabad in India. We have Professor Dr. Martin Škop, Dean of the Faculty of Law, Masaryk University of Czech Republic. And we have Professor Dr. Giuseppe Nesi, former Dean, Faculty of Law, University of Trento, Italy. And of course, my very dear friend, Professor Dr. Sudhir Krishnaswamy, Vice-Chancellor of the National Law School of India, University, Bengaluru in India. Formally welcoming you, I would now hand over the session to Professor Shilpi Bhattacharya, who will be moderating this panel. Over to you, Shilpi. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Raj. So as we know, COVID-19 has changed how legal services are provided as well as how legal education is now being delivered in law schools. But how has this really affected law schools? And here, sort of the idea of law school is more as an institution that serves a particular purpose in society, which is broader than just familiarizing students with rules of law. So are law schools supposed to be a reflection of the times, or are they supposed to be at the center of change? What role should law schools be playing during this time of change that we're all facing? And this is the broader theme of today's session. So the law school of today, of course, faces multiple challenges, including COVID-19. Challenges from the rise of the internet and social media, where Google is treated as God, to increasing intolerance, inequality, isolation, and discrimination, as well as the economic challenges that our students are facing today in terms of fewer jobs. The model of education that is being provided by law schools in the time of COVID is also being challenged by providers of what we call to be EdTech, which is the movement towards sort of digital education, where there's more priority being given to skill-oriented rather than theoretical training in the law. And we have companies like iPleaders and Not Just Lex, which are sort of claiming to sort of build bridges between the traditional law school and what they think students need to know in order to succeed as corporate lawyers. So how should law schools respond to the challenges that the pandemic is throwing up, including the rise of these sort of digital providers of legal education like iPleaders? How should law schools design curricula as well as assessments to suit the changed method of teaching, as well as to prepare our students for this new world where the practice of law may also be going online? How does one ensure, for instance, that attendance, and more importantly, that students are engaging with lectures in the online format? Issues like plagiarism are becoming increasingly important with regard to assessments. But is there a one-size-fits-all approach to deal with issues like plagiarism? How is teaching to be assessed in these times? Should teachers, for instance, place more emphasis on the imparting of human values? Is the law school now to be taken as a set of recorded lectures that just anyone can listen to? How do law schools ensure equity and fairness in the delivery of education? The challenges presented by COVID-19 have also proved to be opportunities to rethink the idea of the law school and the role that law schools play in society. So with this sort of introduction, we will move on to listening to our speakers on some issues that the challenges of COVID-19 place towards the role of law schools in society. So we have a very distinguished panel of speakers today, and I'm going to ask all of you certain questions, and I hope that there's going to be a vibrant discussion. So I was thinking that I would ask all of you to address these questions, and we could probably go in the order of Professor Dhanda, then Professor Krishnaswamy, then Professor Nesi, and then Professor Škop. And then in the next set of questions, maybe we could start with Professor Škop, then go to Professor Nesi, then Professor Krishnaswamy and Professor Dhanda. And if you'd like to respond to each other, then that would also be wonderful. So we'd start with maybe a broader sort of set of questions, which is sort of how do you situate the law school in the present and in the post-pandemic world? Do you see the law school as fundamentally changing in the post-pandemic world? Would you say that the role of faculty and students is changing? And if so, in what ways do you see their role as changing? And I'd like to add something from my own perspective here, which is how can a law school be empathetic to each student's individual experiences in the online format of teaching, while also maintaining sort of the ability to effectively impart legal education? So if maybe each of you could address some or all of these questions in 3 to 4 minutes. And I might have to sort of just stop you maybe if you're going a little bit over time, because we'd like to hear your views on a number of different issues. So I invite Professor Dhanda.
Thank you, Shilpi. Thank you so much. See, the way I see the range of questions that you're asking, and there was a lot of emphasis on change. There was also the other kind of challenge that you're asking in terms of how do we individuate, you know? Do we really have this one-size-fit-all kind of response to this situation? My first point somewhere would be that possibly amongst the very foundational engagements that we need to make is that how much of how we operate on is to be rule-bound. And rule-bound necessarily becomes like, you know, you set up a norm for everybody and you say, this is the frame, this is the standard, this is the prototype, and everyone has to follow it. I think that's one particular belief system which has got shaken in a very major kind of way, because that's how you wish to operate. That, oh, this is how we have looked at everything, and, you know, in very utilitarian sort of outlook to say the maximum number of people will benefit from it. So hence we are going for this model. And then who falls by the wayside is really sad and unfortunate. That's one way of looking at it. The other way is to say that, okay, maybe as law people, we really need to look at this tension between rule and discretion, between the whole question of that if we are concerned with outcomes, then it's outcomes which should dictate what we will do, not really just the procedure. So if it is that we want our students to sort of being, you know, like engaging with or knowing, or I mean, engaging with, let's say, the not just the information, but the analysis that we are offering them, then it's important that we don't get stuck with the fact that the only way in which that engagement can happen is that if I am scheduling a class at this point of time, every single one of you should log at that point. And if you don't log in, then poor attendance and really speaking, no participation, and hence, oh my God, you know, we are losing education or things are really not going the right way. Because of the fact that it is something that we are also recording, we ask them to attend, we invite them and make it interesting that the live classes do have a requisite number of people. But I somewhere feel that we stop this infantilizing of our students, recognize the fact that they would know and what is good for them, and also recognize that in a country which is as diverse as it is, and I know for a fact that I have students, some people who are like maybe, you know, in one's two-bedroom flat, a whole family of 8 or 10 are living together. You are sharing a computer, or you're sharing the internet space, or the time at which my classes are happening, the child's mother or father also have their office duties. So in that kind of a scenario, I would think that my insistence that, no, you need to be coming to my live class and that's the only way in which education can happen is not a particularly smart way of going about things, not even a very fair way of going about things. The other point that I would want to make is like, and I always say this, that every situation throws up its own opportunities. I think all of us as teachers have realized that, yes, when we do the offline class or the live classes, repetition or saying the same thing in different kinds of ways and answering questions, the same question in different ways, is one way in which we kind of, reach our students and see to it that every one of them gets what we are trying to say. We can read their expressions, with just not the verbal, but the non-verbal communication which happens. I think it's important for all of us teachers to recognize that the recording is somewhere giving them a chance of visiting and revisiting your lecture on an again and again basis. So as teachers, we would need to be changing the way we teach. The manner in which, say, I can say for myself that I'm a very Socratic method way of kind of teacher who would constantly keep having these question answers back and forth, launching discussions, in the discussion, trying to sort of keep a vibrant class. I have totally altered my model of teaching post the pandemic in this entire online mode, that I really work on my lectures, and I have these proper structured, dense lectures, with or without slides is not the point, but proper lectures wherein you are thoroughly informing your students of the issues, also of the controversies, and allowing them hence to engage with, and like listening to it as many times. You take this into account that if they don't understand, they can replay it. And that replay is something which we did not have in offline classes. It is an opportunity we've got here. So if I had to very quickly say to you that what I see we should be doing is, one is that we recognize that this tension between rule and discretion is at the heart of how a lot of legal administration, whether in the law school or outside the law school, happens. It's about time that we recognize it, that, okay, one size doesn't fit all, and start to make rules for our discretion, rather than to sort of like make rules the ruling idiom under which we are administering things. See what opportunities can be happening within the system, and lastly, recognize the diversity within which our students subsist, and not try to make in any model which is exclusionary. In fact, as far as we try to see what is the way in which we can operate, what's the flexibility we can bring in by which we can get all our students on board. This would be like at least my first level statement.
Thank you so much, Professor Dhanda, and I completely agree with you that it's very important for us to be flexible in our approaches towards teaching in the online format, and so much of what you said resonated with me. Thank you. Professor Krishnaswamy.
Thanks, Shilpi. I want to pick up from where Professor Dhanda left it, and try and capture some of what it felt to be like in March of 2020. I think when the pandemic hit and we were clear that there were going to be lockdowns and our corridors were emptying out of students, our priority at that time was simply to ensure some continuity, some survival of the academic program, scrambling to ensure that we could deliver more or less what we promised in the academic program, and do that with some resilience. That is, to do it every day, to not do it episodically. We just do it for 3 days and then we don't know what happens after that. And so a lot of that initial time and energy was spent just building continuity. I must say that the initial impetus was not to think about how different the COVID pandemic situation was, but how we could continue to do what we were doing in the past with the same level of integrity and competence. But then as we moved on, then it became clear that some of the long run changes in education were now getting rapidly compressed in a very short time scale. And Professor Dhanda referred to a few of them, and since she's said it quite lucidly and in detail, I'll just emphasize a few of those elements. One thing that became clear was that going forward, a hybrid model of the classroom is going to stay. Recorded lectures, good, well-organized lectures, are important as much as the Socratic engagement or worksheet-based engagement classes are important. And it's clear that as we scale up and universities become bigger, we're going to deploy these models much more effectively than we have in the past. In the past, many of us have privileged the small class and said engagement in the classroom, and that's that. And now we have a diversity of approaches to that educational exercise. And I think that's going to be valuable in the ways that Professor Dhanda highlighted. It may even be more valuable for students who don't come to the law school with the necessary confidence. They need a little more time, but here we have a format that gives them that time. It's also taught us that geography matters less than we thought. And so today we can teach across geography, and in that sense, speaking for us, we've had a very exciting time. We've had people teaching in our programs across the world, across the country, and that's added a vitality to our programs that it's great to see. And I guess the third element is that the synchronous versus asynchronous debate is going to become very sharp. How much of our teaching and learning needs to happen at the same time? I wish I could be as sanguine as Professor Dhanda in assuming that my students always know what's best for them. I find that, I'm
older.
I find that there's a sort of digital technology is beguiling. It tells us that material is always there, but it's so much like the Amazon Kindle, where you know that there are the 1,000 books that you'll never read if you don't read it then. And my sense is that we'll have to figure this one out. How much of education can be asynchronous? How much of it needs to be synchronous? Clearly, it needs to be both. And what percentages and what balances work might vary from institution to institution and culture to culture. But a lot of that figuring out we have to do. I'll say one last thing. You asked us a specific question about empathy and the personalization of learning. And one of the great promises of the new digital tech is that it can allow a personalization of pathways of learning. Now, if one goes back into early critical pedagogy, and I don't want to cite the hallowed names who might disavow digital technology itself, but even if we take that risk, we always used to speak in terms of a pedagogy that speaks and engages the person. And imagine that if we had the ability to allow people to craft pathways of learning, then digital tech could be an enabler here. And so let me just say that much. And I would say where we sit now with the hint of a vaccine around the corner and a possible return in the early part of 2021, it's perfect timing for us to have this conversation and ask, what have we learned? What would we change looking ahead? Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Krishnaswamy. And you've taken a slightly more measured sort of view of the situation, which is definitely sort of your experience speaking. A lot of things for us to look forward to, but also things that we need to be more careful about in terms of how we educate our students during these times, and sort of larger questions of the long-term implications of this kind of technology on the way that we teach. I would like to move on now to Professor Nesi.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and good afternoon to you. I start again from what you have just said. I think that we, of course, had to adapt our method of teaching and also method of living and participating in our activities with the students. Suddenly, we had to do it in March when nobody thought that this was going to be a method we were going to use for a long period of time. Actually, I did two courses. One last academic year, from February until June of 2020, and another one from the beginning of September until mid-November this year. They were two different courses. The first one was attended by more than 200 students, and the second one was attended by 30 students. So first of all, I think that in order to understand how we have to behave, we have also to know what type of audience we have in front of us. If you have a course which is attended by too many students, I mean, too many, 200 students is not a little number, you have to couple to the Socratic method or the ex cathedra method with something else. So you have to be available to students not only in your hours of lectures, but also beyond these hours of lecture. So first of all, what changed for me was the fact that although I kept my 65 hours, 70 hours of courses, I had to add at least the same amount of time in order to be available for students to explain what we did during the lectures, and not only for those who were present, but also for those who were not able to be present. And this is something that, of course, changed a lot, because we didn't have so much time for reception, for talking to students after the lectures. This means, of course, that you have to reschedule the entire week and the entire work you have to do. Being available to students and finding a sort of extra lecture time you have to allot to these activities. But this, in my opinion, is fundamental. Otherwise, students are not, I mean, they could find too many difficulties in order to follow what you have to do. Secondly, you have to help them not only for the lessons, but also with other type of activities. So you have to be extremely precise in your syllabus. You have to be able to modify it when necessity arises. And this is also something we were not acquainted to. Another important issue that I like to underline, I agree with what has been said before as regards the flexibility and our ability to be available to students, and this is absolutely fine with me. But at the same time, I think that we have also to make the students aware that they have to exploit to the maximum the possibility of talking not only to the professors, to the teachers, but also among them. Because I think that this is also something that has to change. You know, before the students meet in the corridors, meet during the classes. Now they have to meet, they have also to meet online. So it's not something that changes only for the lessons, but what has changed is affecting also the life, I would say, beyond the lessons. And the students understood this quite well. As regards, for instance, small classes, I insisted a lot on the creation of study groups. I did it also before, of course, but now it's much more important to oblige, so to say, the students to have extra time to devote to meetings, to devote to social life, which before, as I said, happened in the corridors or during the classes, now has to happen online. This is not something I love, I must say. I like very much to go back to our traditional way of teaching and living. But this is something we have to advise the students about, because otherwise the risk is that they think that after the lecture, after the lesson, everything is over. This is not like this. You have to continue your learning experience well beyond the lecture and the lessons. I stop here for the moment.
Thank you so much. And I think that's very, very valid points in the sense of sort of how we view ourselves as teachers, that we need to sort of take on a much more proactive role, not only in imparting education, but sort of in ensuring that sort of students can interact in similar ways as they were doing earlier. And for that, we might have to move out of our own comfort zones to ensure that not only is education being provided effectively, but sort of students are able to sort of integrate what is being learned in a more holistic manner. So, and that also goes to some of the questions I was planning to ask later on in the discussion. So thank you so much. And I'd like to move on to our final speaker, Professor Škop.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity and good afternoon. It's difficult now to add something to speakers who spoke before me because everything was mentioned. And on the other side, it's difficult to describe the situation now because maybe you are in the eye of a hurricane and everything is changing, but we are not still able to see or to foresee the results of these changes. But I'll try something. We can distinguish three lines, or through three main lines in this situation. The first one is the institutional. And each of this line is not only, but it was mentioned before, it is not only the challenge, but also the opportunity. And this is important. The institutional line is about the opening of universities. This conference is a brilliant example. We meet people from all over the world with very low expenses. We can discuss with people from India, from Italy, from any other state. What we should have on mind is only the time zone and nothing more. So we can share experience. We can open the committees, some procedures, everything to people from different countries, from different cultures, and learn a different point of views. So this is a really important opportunity to open our views and to share ideas and experiences all over the world. And the same can be beneficiary also for students, because it's now very easy to learn something about the law of the United States, of Japan, of India, of China, of Africa. It's very easy. They just need to want to take this opportunity and use it. The second line is educational. This is important because, of course, we are schools after all, and we can change. It's difficult to say if we will change the curriculum. I don't think that the law will change. It will change the practice, it will change the administration, but I'm not sure if it will change the law. The law is still the same for more than 2,000 years, maybe 3,000 years, it's still the same. There are some differences in practice, but the norms are still the same. So the law may be, I'm not sure, I'm not a legal historian, still will be the same, but the education, the didactic process and pedagogical approaches have to change. What is important in law for me is the sharing the experience and the face-to-face contact, including the social contact, is irreplaceable. It is something that has to be in legal education, but we can prepare new materials. We can make a network of these materials. We can use internet, we can make many examples, can take and return and again to these materials, and they can think about it. And we as a teachers have the duty to help them to understand. So if they will have any question, they can ask. Here you have the materials, and now please ask me and share your ideas with your colleagues. This is also important, and this is the third line, the social line, because we can open not only to people from academia, also to the broader audience. We can say to people, what is law about, and make it more popular. What are the main lines of legal thought? We can prepare on a secondary or elementary school to think about the law, about legal issues in some, well, popular form, maybe. And also, we can help students to understand law. What is important, and this is challenge, because they are not meeting each other. They are in isolation, and they are, it will sound, well, a little bit strange, but they are without discipline. And discipline and the schedule of their life is very important. At least to reward, you need to have a discipline. So first you have to do that, then you can reward and make a revolution. There is no revolution without an order. So to prepare them to please listen, please learn, please read. And not only, well, now I don't want, I have no time, I will return back in 50 minutes, in 5 days, in 1 month. No, read it now, do it now, because this is important. This is important for everyone, because we are people. And this is the same, we can help them in a difficult situation. You want to communicate with your teacher, this is opportunity. Here you can, because we can meet every time without regard to the place. So I will finish. Important is to use these opportunities and to change the promotion of legal education. Maybe not to change the core, but change our approach. And I think that our approach as a teacher is changing and is opening the academia to a more broad audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think that really sort of ties in very well with the rest of the discussion I've had, because you sort of highlighted sort of new ways that we can think about helping our students and new ways that students can think about interacting with faculty, and sort of how we can make the most of the situation in various ways by just changing how we think and how we approach pedagogy, as well as sort of other aspects of teaching, right? So curricula doesn't change, but still the way that we communicate that curricula and the way that we interact with our students can certainly change. So now I'm just looking at the time, and I'd like to save the last 15 minutes for questions from the audience. So I'm just maybe going to ask you to be brief. Some of you already sort of addressed the question that I'm going to ask, but maybe if you have something to add, and we just briefly, maybe a couple of minutes responses from each of you. And we'll start with you, Professor Škop, because you went last time. So maybe some of what you had to say got covered by the previous speakers. So the question is, do you, so of course the biggest challenge of COVID is moving online. Do you think that law schools need to try to recreate physical spaces for effectively imparting legal skills like drafting, argumentation, and negotiation? And if so, how do you think law schools can do this? And added to this is the idea that the law school experience, which Professor Nesi also spoke about, is shaped so much by what happens outside the classroom, which is sort of these interactions, which you've also spoken about, Professor Škop. So to what extent are the laws of these interactions significant in the law school that we see today? And do they need to be recreated in different ways? And finally, sort of going into other aspects of life on campus, such as co-curricular and extracurricular activities, sort of art, culture, socializing. How do law schools ensure that these aspects of the experience of students can be provided in the post-COVID world? Professor Škop, we'll start with you.
Thank you. This is difficult. What I think is that the classical approach to education is irreplaceable. We need to meet students at the classroom. We need to meet with them face to face and discuss to prepare them to the personal contact. Well, to say them without any barrier, to say them, well, this is right, this is wrong. It's a need to learn not only the knowledge, but also the ethics, the behavior, everything. And this can be only through the face-to-face contact. The internet, well, we are now speaking through the Zoom. Yes, this is super to have it, and this is great to use it. But this should not be the core of legal education. Of course, it can be used in writing, in argumentation, but what we are facing now in Czech Republic, for example, is the increase of formalism. Because if they will only focus on writing, on the written laws, the students will move toward a formal approach to law. But this formal approach is totally without people. This is people-less. And what we need is to prepare them that they will need people. They will decide about people, and they will need to deal with people's emotions. And to find emotions in the screen of a computer or in some book, it is very difficult. So I think that this personal contact is very important in legal education, because it is not about what is written in the code or in precedents, but it is about a people's life. This is important for me. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor Škop. Very interesting. Professor Nesi?
Shilpi, yes, we are in a situation, I would say that we at law schools, we are in a situation of privilege. Especially we think that we are already in a setting that has already its rules and methods and way of doing things. But I think that what should be extremely important for the future is also to think about the innovative part of our work. The innovative part of our work is something that can be experienced and can be tried only through physical presence. So I think that we have to be creative somehow, but I also think that there is something that is irreplaceable. And this is the physical contact, the eye to eye, which is different from eye to eye through a monitor. In this regard, I think that we have to keep in mind that there is something that is already on tracks, and we have to try to keep it as it is. But on the other side, we have to think that only through innovation we can develop new methods of teaching, new methods of living, and also new methods of performing the profession. So I would say that all these things must be kept together if we are able to do it. Thinking that anyway our starting point is a good starting point. So we have to keep advantage of these while also thinking to something new, to something that could be more enriching for our students, and for future professionals. This is very, very important in our way of living and teaching and giving something to the students. And of course, this refers also to the relations among professors. We have also to develop fora in order to be able to discuss. Yesterday night, I insisted very much, but I was able to keep all the 12 international lawyers who are in our university in a meeting we organized through Doodle. And so we met only for half an hour, you know, not too much time. This is also something we have to keep in mind. The way of meeting is not as it was before, long sessions, hours and hours. No, now we have to do things in a very compact way, but also in a very efficient way, as you are doing now,
Thank you very much, Professor Nesi. Professor Krishnaswamy?
Thanks, Shilpi. I'm going to use, coming from a city like Bangalore, which is an outsourcing hub for IT processing from around the world. We've grown up thinking that all of this digitization and the digital transformation is for, you know, insurance broking and for maybe some kind of file processing, IT help desk. You know. Those are the kinds of professional spaces that get outsourced, and those are the kinds of professional spaces that undergo a digital transformation. And I think COVID-19, and to use the US vaccine program's name, is warp speed. It's given us a glimpse of the future. It's given us a hint of what's to come for the legal profession and for legal education. And let me just point out three important things that are happening along with the pressures of COVID. First, the power of natural language search and neural programming in search is proceeding at such a rapid pace that the search function, which is a very important function of what we teach in the law school, can now be processed using natural language. And suddenly we will start to think about, almost the first and second year of the law school program as being substitutable. I won't say dispensable, I'll just say substitutable. The second technology that we are already seeing great evidence of that progress is text and document generation. And with predictive text and with the ability to generate complex documents, we're going to find that the regular humdrum drafting that we teach is going to come under some pressure. There is a part of this that computation can do. And the third element is workflow automation. We're finding that there are a certain range of functions that are quite amenable to programming and to structured workflows that don't require the most complicated human collectives to work around them. What does this mean? Or what does this all add up to? I think what it adds up to, at least in my mind, is that we have to prepare our students to be digitally ready. And I think that legal education, we can ignore this, but we are better off. And in my mind, I'm very clear, I'm not saying that we're ready to do this, but I'm very clear that we should do this, is that we have to teach our students how to code. I think every law student has to understand elementary, must acquire elementary coding ability. Because the future of the legal profession will be about organizing code around documentation, around workflows, which will determine one's success in the profession. I'm not saying for a moment that this is not a dystopian future for me. It's not that human beings are going away anywhere. They'll just be doing different things. And the legal profession is going in that direction. And we've got a sneak preview. COVID-19 has given us a sneak preview of what's possible, how the courtroom will change, how life will be reorganized. I think Professor Giuseppe gave us a sense of how even a social interaction among colleagues will change. And I'm not a technology skeptic to the extent that I think it destroys a humanistic education or human values generally. I wouldn't be so harsh. So my quick sense to respond to your question is that is physical space, now that's the question you asked us, Shilpi, and I'm in a long-winded way coming back to your question. So what do we need the physical space for? And here I think the answer is we're assuming that the vaccines are successful and successful at scale. So come March 2021, maybe we're back to normal. Maybe we're not. Maybe we're not going to live in a world of a pandemic. We're going to live in a world of serial pandemics. And then the potential of that kind of world to reorganize social and professional space is rather profound. So I think the lesson I would learn from all of this is that yes, physical space, I guess I'll close with this. I think what we have all learned is how dear physical space is. That it's the real premium, it's the premium human experience. And not all of us can have it or have as much of it as we want. And we may well be working towards both a professional and a natural world where we come to regard that physical engagement as such a premium experience that we would give an arm and a leg for and maybe pay a lot of money for if the world gets reorganized like that. And we will have to anticipate and live with the possibility that the digital has come to stay and will occupy a good part of our lives, certainly much more of our lives than we imagined before March 2020.
Right. Thank you so much, Professor Krishnaswamy. And that was actually quite provocative as well. And it would be nice to hear what our fellow panelists have to say in response to that. Sort of, you're suggesting that sort of even the nature of legal skills that we need to impart will ultimately change. And moving on to Professor Dhanda.
Well, I just wanted to sort of take off from where Sudhir left off and to say that, realities keep changing. If we look back and we look at things historically, it's like, there was a point at which the sort of communication that we are having, pandemics have happened in the past. But pandemics, when they've happened in the past, have happened in the geographically isolated kind of realities, which people lived it out. Some people died, some survived, and all of that. We are, in a way, in a situation where an alternative reality has also opened up for us. And that alternative reality is, you've got to ask, okay, what all can you do with it or not do with it? We can, of course, carry on and say, but this is something that we have to physically interact with. But it's also, if we say it and we proceed in that manner and with that strong sense of loss, that necessarily also in some way diminishes both your ability to innovate as well as to cope. So I would somewhere, and I wouldn't be presumptuous enough, maybe because Sudhir is way younger, so he can think in terms of what he's going to teach his students. In terms of technology, I am going to be thinking more in terms of what my students can teach me in terms of technology and how much they have. Also, one has to accept the fact that this is a generation which lives on social media. this is a generation whose large amount of socializing doesn't happen, really speaking, in so much addas of the physical kind, but it's like what you put on Insta and what you said on Facebook, and what all are you doing in the various mediums by which you are interacting, which particular kind of app do you create by which you can kind of simulate an experience of another kind. For us, it'll always be, you know, like my mother's generation would believe that the telephone was revolutionary. You know, the very fact that you could just pick up the phone and connect up with, and for me, like, I know that my grandchild's competence with the social media, with the various kinds of electronic mediums is way more than mine. And that's their reality. So be it like, you know, using the breakout sessions and getting groups to be forming there, be it like to be handing over teaching responsibilities to your students, to creating groups and asking them to come forward and lead the discourse. See, when I'm saying is that, you know, trust in your students, I'm also saying treat them as adults. You are having full-fledged adults who come to study with you. I think it's about time that we kind of let their innovation, because it's going to be, large part of this world is going to be their world. And exactly how are they going to, constitute it, how that interaction is going to happen, how are you going to judge the whole question of whether you can trust someone or not trust someone just looking at them through the screen. You know, it's like, do facial expressions, can they be sort of discerned? Even when, I can tell you very honestly, with, you know, there was a whole point at which all your students will switch off cameras and you're just speaking to names on the screen, because they are saying we are saving digital space. And I got so used to that happening that when they started switching on cameras and they, you know, you could see them at such close quarters, I started scrolling my screen and saying, I don't want to see you. You know, it's like, it's what I'm trying to say to you is this, that I think we should look at this entire business of, okay, if this is the new reality, humans have been innovative enough to be able to work out how those basic needs will be met. And if physical interaction times are going to become at a premium or are going to get limited, then you will find other ways of connecting, because if you need to connect, you will find ways. And I would prefer to keep that kind of an optimistic note and to say, okay, this is happening technologically, so what's the big deal? Because if that is the way in which we are headed, then that's the way in which we are headed. It's also possible with climate change and all of that looming on us, that we may have a total collapse of all this and we are back to the most, you know, immediate and rustic and limited kind of interaction with each other. Who knows? Be prepared for either is what I would say.
Yeah, and that ties in also with what Professor Nesi was saying in terms of being innovative, and also what Professor Škop was saying. So that was a very nice way to tie up the whole discussion. So now we have 7 minutes left, and there are some questions coming in from the audience, which maybe because we have such little time, I'm not sure whether we will have time to go through everyone, but maybe whoever would like to maybe respond to these questions, I'll just read out the question, and then maybe if Professor Dhanda wants to start with responding, or sort of we can just take it as it comes. So the question is, I think we'll have maybe only time for one question, but let's see. So the question is that law schools mirror sort of the profession, mirroring the profession of law, are intensely hierarchical spaces. Students coming from families associated with the law have a clear advantage, even at the university level. How can the idea of the law school in a COVID and post-COVID world be made more inclusive, keeping in mind that the pandemic has not only laid bare, but even exacerbated socioeconomic inequalities?
Well, I would say, firstly, just admit to it that this exists, that this kind of inequity exists. And to some extent, it has been exacerbated. So how are you going to sort of like see to it that you go for an inclusive model? How do you see to it that each one does? You know, the very admission is big for at least all the national law schools, as well as for Jindal and other places, because we are dealing with the privileged of the country. And for these privileged in the country to be at least cognizant of the fact that, listen, you are privileged and you're getting something which lots of other people are not getting. So how do you kind of share out? How do you sort of like open up your classrooms and your materials for people just than yourself? And at least for your own, you know, it is like, okay, if you don't have access to net, then are you getting recordings reach there? What are you doing in ensuring that your own, at least your own students are not losing out? And your own social responsibility as to how much of your own resources are you throwing open for all? I think if law schools actively engage with questions of justice and make their own students do that, and if COVID-19 makes us confront with the inequity or the hierarchy which subsists in our society, I think it would be a gain of the crisis.
So I suppose there are twin realities emerging from the pandemic. The first is that digital access is not uniform. And to that extent, those exclusions might aggravate other exclusions that are already in place. I think as a structural matter, the NLU system, at least as it's designed, has the potential to bring a new generation of students into the legal profession who may not have a prior legal background. And so that is that's not an idle hope. That has indeed happened over the last 2 decades. And so there's good evidence and good reason to be optimistic about that. Will the COVID pandemic change this? I don't think so. I think that dynamic is already at work. But the point about digital learning is that it has significant democratizing potential. I think Professor Dhanda already said that material availability, I suspect, is going to become a non-issue, even in a period of 3 to 5 years. The internet is going to be flooded with digital learning materials. Now, the real premium will be how do you organize it? How do you organize learning and real engagement around it? That is going to be a pedagogical challenge. It's something that all of us will have to confront and respond to. But I'm not, I wouldn't go down the path of saying that the COVID pandemic will somehow irreversibly set us back. I think there are some promising possibilities and some things we need to check, which is the digital exclusion part to make this real. Let me stop.
Thank you so much, Professor Krishnaswamy. And I think maybe Professor Nesi and Professor Škop can address another question that has come, which is because maybe sort of the inequality question is more maybe central to India, but sort of another question is that along with COVID, the world, the post-COVID world has sort of exacerbated other crises as well. So crises on political fronts, social fronts, economic fronts, environmental fronts. Some of you have already mentioned that as well. How should law schools respond to these multiple crises that the post-COVID world brings with it? So it's COVID mixed with a number of other things. Do you think that law schools will play an important role in addressing these crises that the world is seeing today?
Thank you. I think that we have great responsibilities in this regard, and we should try to match this challenge, especially as regards fields which are in recent times have been surely undermined, not only by COVID, but by some thoughts. Demagogic or populistic that are quite common in many societies. So I think that we have this responsibility of trying to single out in this flood of information that is coming in recent times, not only because of COVID, but because of the development of technologies. We have to try to give to our students some tools, some means that will allow them to differentiate the bad information, for instance, from reliable information, or they should possess the critical skills to understand what is worth spreading and what is worth being cautious about. So if we are able to do this in the post-COVID-19 world, we will surely improve the situation, and we will help the society to find its way to further development. But this is very, very important, I think, and we have this responsibility. We have to respond to this challenge in a very responsible manner.
Thank you. Professor Škop, would you like to add something?
Oh, it's difficult to add something, but I think that faculties of law, the law faculties, will have an important role, because we are not only educating people or lawyers, but we are also raising the lawyers. And we need to give them values and the possibility to listen, to understand, and to know what is the society about, that they are deciding about people, and they, in every crisis, in every problematic situation, they need to understand what it is about and how to decide according to values that are important in society. So if we will still in this position, the faculty, or we will have the very important role in the not only legal systems, but in cultural systems in every society.
I really want to take this opportunity to thank you, Shilpi, for so ably and skillfully moderating the session. I really want to appreciate Dr. Amita Dhanda, Dr. Nesi, Dr. Škop, as well as Sudhir for being present here, participating in this absolutely fantastic panel. In fact, some of the things that you discussed in this panel, we will visit in the next couple of days in some of the sessions as well. But the idea of what will change and what will not, and what shouldn't, those are very important questions that all of us in our own settings will value. So once again, thank you for your presence and participation.